Hey folks, this is Fernando doing another video for the Modern Survivalist. As promised, a video on why the large cities are significantly safer than living in the country. This isn't me making up stuff. When I say significantly safer, I'm actually directly quoting the study that I'm going to be making reference to in this video. This is from Annals of Emergency Medicine Study. This is a study that has been done in the United States from 1999 to 2006. It has been taking into account 1.2 million deaths. All right, so 1.2 million deaths from 1999 to 2006. And the study basically shows the following. It says that the risk of injury death is 22% higher in the country than in the city. 22% higher in the country than in the city. This is taking into account both violent crime and accidental death. The study also shows, keep in mind this isn't biased in any way. This is from Emergency Medicine, a research study that I'm going to be leaving the link below if you want to check it yourself. This study is simply saying that it's the chances of unintentional injury deaths are 15% higher than those of homicide. So you're 15 times more likely to suffer an unintentional injury death than being a victim of a homicide. All right. This is why, maybe some of you folks wondering, well, but cities are more dangerous because of crime. Yeah, well, the thing is that most people don't die because of murder and homicide and crime-related deaths. Most people end up dying because of unintentional injuries death. And if you're thinking right now, car accidents, that's actually correct. It's by far the main cause of accidental injury, unintentional injury death. That's car accidents. This is something that I was discussing with a friend of mine in a forum a few days ago, and it's pretty interesting. The study says, the study actually shows that of 100,000 people, you have 27.61 deaths in 100,000 people in rural areas versus 10.58 over 100,000 people in the cities. All right, so rural areas 27.61, city 10.58, almost 3 times more likely to die of a car accident, of a car-related death, almost 3 times more likely in the rural areas versus the city. Probably because of higher speeds, most likely. This is just me making assumptions. This isn't part of the study, but why is it that you have almost 3 times more chance of deaths of car accidents? Speed, maybe, the kind of machinery, the kind of vehicles. You have bigger trucks and such. So for whatever reason, you have almost 27.61 against 10.58, almost 3 times more likely in the main cause of unintentional accidental death. Now, if you're wondering, well, what about gun-related deaths? Not that it really matters, because as this study is simply interested, it's researching people dying and where is it that people end up dying most. Rather than going into why. But if you're wondering in terms of gun-related deaths, the study says that there's no difference. Okay, you're just as likely to die of a gunshot wound in the country as in the city. Okay, you may be thinking, well, that's impossible. Well, keep in mind that you can die with a gun-related death in different ways. It's not just homicide, there's also accidental deaths. And here's something interesting. The study says that even though there's no difference and you're just as likely to die from a gunshot wound or a gun-related death just in the city as in the country, the study does show that there's more gun-related deaths in the city for people of ages ranging 20 to 44 versus more deaths in the country for people under the age of 20 or over the age of 44. Again, you're more likely to die of a gun-related death in the country if you are under the age of 20 or over the age of 44 versus you being more likely to die of a gun-related death if you are between the ages of 20 and 44. Between 20 and 44, you're more likely to die of a gun-related death in the city. Probably because of this this crime thing. You probably have more of a chance of being involved in a thinking of homicide, especially drug-related or gang-related or crime-related deaths. Those are more likely to happen for people in those in that younger age range, 20 to 44. Now, why is it that people under the age of 20 are more likely to die of a gun-related death in the country than in the city? Probably, and this is again me making an assumption of these facts that the research is showing us, that probably because of you maybe have more guns being used in the country, something that we've talked about working guns in farms in the country, used for hunting, used for dispatching games. And you have to keep in mind that many of the guns, of the deaths related to guns, are accidental ones. People that have left the gun improperly stored, or the people in the family, especially the children, haven't been properly educated on gun safety. So there is an increased chance of a gun death there. What about over the age of 44? Why is it more likely to have that gun-related death over the age of 44 in the country? Well, again, here we have to think of the possibility of accidental gun deaths. Especially, I'm thinking here of hunting. Hunting related deaths. That's something that we've all heard of. I know I've heard of a few myself. And of course, these things do happen more in the country, where actually people are hunting and using the gun, than in the city, where someone that is over the age of 44 is not going to be hunting in the middle of a city. So interesting information. I at least find it to be very interesting. What about health and fitness and such? Well, you have to take this very carefully. There are studies. I don't have that specific piece of research here myself, but I know there's ones that's showing that, of course, well, not of course, but it's actually being proven that you have there's less stress for people living in the country, but it's not necessarily means that you're healthier living in the country than living in the city. Actually, study shows that obesity, there's more obesity in the country than in the city. People may be surprised by that, and they may assume that, well, living in the country, it's more of a healthy life. Well, it's healthy in some ways, not so healthy in others. Obesity, according to the 2012 national study in the Journal of Rural Health, shows that you have 33% of obesity in urban America. All right, this is all studies in the United States. 33% of obesity in urban America versus 39% of obesity in rural America. So in the country, you have 39% obesity, 39% of obesity in the country versus 33% of obesity in the cities. Why is this? Well, it turns out that people in cities end up walking a lot more than people in the country. And this is something that if I'm thinking of personal experience and such, I see that I end up, I'm not living in a rural setting, but it's more of a suburban one. I find myself using my car a lot more than when I lived in the middle of Buenos Aires. In Buenos Aires, I was in this massive city, and yeah, completely honest, I did walk a lot more. I walked more to different places I had to go to. I would walk more, use more public transportation, which forces you to walk more to those places. I would take the bus, the train, subways, and yeah, you end up walking more. You also have maybe more of a you have more gyms and more health centers and such in the city than in rural settings. That you have these outdoors places and such, but maybe not thinking so much about working out specifically. There's also the implication of more machinery being used these days than a few years ago, so there's less manual labor necessary, even though, of course, as anyone that lives in a farm or in the country knows, there's a lot of jobs, a lot of work to be done, but not as much as it used to be. And what clearly affects health and and wait more is that you end up using your vehicle a lot more in the country than in the city. You end up driving more because distances force you to do so. You cannot walk, for 10 or 100 miles all the time. You necessarily have to use your vehicle. I find myself doing that quite a bit, using my car more rather than walking. So yes, it's very interesting. One final piece of information, trying to keep this video short, is that our studies here says the relationship between distance to hospitals and patient mortality in emergency, an observational study. This is a study that, again, found online. This is by John Nickel, James West, Steve Godakir, and Janet Turner. Basically, the study shows the following. The conclusion of the study is that increased journey distance to hospitals appears to be associated with increased risk of mortality, something that I've mentioned many times before. Our data suggests that a 10-kilometer increase in straight line distance is associated with around a 1% absolute increase in mortality. Okay, got that? 10-kilometer distance increase means an increase of 1% of an absolute increase in mortality. So if 10 kilometers increases your absolute increase in mortality 1%, imagine with 100 kilometers, you're talking about an increase of 10%, which is huge. And this goes directly against this idea. It's indirectly proportional to this idea of distance being safer, being 200 kilometers away from a hospital or from a city being much safer. Absolute madness, makes no sense, and is completely contradictory and opposite to what data is showing us here. People think so much about, worrying about zombies and looters and city slickers raising and attacking and the golden horde and such. Guys, focus on real information. This is the kind of stuff that I always mention, and this is the kind of stuff that realistic preparedness is based on. Not fantasy, not fiction. I love this stuff as much as anyone else. I love a good end of the world movie or apocalyptic movie. I love Mad Max, waiting for the next Mad Max movie, but I put it in the right place. I don't let that influence my realistic preparedness. Okay, guys, this is the kind of thing that you do when you do this for real. When you do real survival and preparedness, you use these facts. And a fool will take this that I'm explaining in this video and go into denial and try to turn it around and deny facts, deny professional studies and information that show some clear data. While a smart person, in spite of whatever life choice you may end up making, because as I always say, life is too short not to do what you like. If you enjoy living in the country, do so by all means. A smart person will take this information that I'm sharing with you guys here and learn to use it so as to be better prepared. Understand the pros and cons of whatever decision that you've made so as to be better prepared. So when you read that obesity is more likely in the country than in the city, okay, you're going to be thinking, okay, I'm not going to be part of the statistics. I understand that I have an increased chance of that happening to me, so I'm going to be paying special attention to that. I see that there's a 22% increase of accidental death, so I'm going to be better prepared for that. I'm going to be taking all the security measures, using heavy machinery and such. I'm going to be extra careful because I understand this data, because I understand these studies, what they're saying. I understand there's an increased chance of a car accident, so I'm going to be having a good kit there. I'm going to be particularly careful when driving. I understand that distance from hospitals means a serious increase in mortality during accidents. The further away I am from hospitals, the more I am likely to die if I ever need to be rushed to a hospital, as I've said many times. So whenever I'm thinking of relocating, whenever I'm thinking of moving and such, I'm going to be doing so living the way that I want to live, living in the country if that's what I choose to do, but understanding that it's foolish to put myself hundreds of miles away, gas tanks of miles away or whatever from the city because that's where the golden horde and zombies are going to be coming from. I'm going to be smart, understanding facts, not fiction, and I'm going to be at least placing myself as close to these hospitals that I obviously need as possible, so as to work against this statistic, so as to not be part of the statistics. That's what the smart person does instead of getting mad with me and leaving some nasty comment there below. Folks, if you want to learn more about realistic survival and preparedness, I do have my books, the Modern Survival Manual, Surviving the Economic Collapse, Realistic Preparedness for living for urban survival. If you want to have a realistic preparedness for bugging out and relocating, my second book, Bugging Out and Relocating, both linked below. The links in Amazon are going to be there below. Real survival, folks, is what I've always done, because I've got into this because this was what was happening to me back in Argentina. I wasn't playing fantasy role games and imagining stuff or reading some fiction survivalist wet dream. I was doing this for real because that was what was happening in my country, in Argentina. And that's what I keep on doing. What I write in my books, what I share in my videos with you folks, what I write in my website and the different posts, I focus on realistic survival and preparedness. Guys, take care, have a great day, see you on our next video.